As you may or may not know, I have been collecting records for a few years. I collect all kinds of records, from rock to jazz, classical, soul, punk, and funk. You name it. I love digging through bins of used records in stores and flea markets, trying to find those unusual pieces of music from the past. The ones that are the most special to my heart are the types of artists that weren't household names. Artists who were talented, but didn't get the airplay for whatever reason that other singers and musicians did, even though their creations were just as good and in a lot of cases better than those of the more popular names. My favorite spot for finding such records is Jerry's Records in Pittsburgh. Jerry's is a bricks and mortar type mom and pop business that just so happens to be the largest seller of used vinyl records found anywhere in America, with millions of records to look through and take home for a really cheap price. Jerry's son, Whistling Willie, runs the 78 section of the store. Here's where you'll find some great old tunes that might not be available to purchase on any format other than on a 78. One going into Willie's shop might at first think they're in a neighborhood bar, rather than in a music store. For every Friday afternoon is happy hour at Whistling Willie's. This is when Willie spins some of his rarest and most prized finds of the week. I caught up with Willie during one such afternoon. The conversation being held was about a very unusual find. It was an acetate of a song called Never by Joe Howard. Acetates are demos that an artist or producer created in order to help shop a song or an artist to a major label. Acetates are usually not released to the public. In most cases, the song contained on the acetate are usually re-recorded before being pressed for mass consumption. No one at Whistling Willie's shop, including myself, had ever heard of Joe Howard or the song Never. The record promotes many questions. For starters, it is a 78. 78s were pretty much completely replaced by the 45 or LP by 1959. The song upon listening, however, suggests that the recording came from the early 60s. Willie and the gang tried looking the record and the artist up in many books of references for record collectors, but were surprised to find that there were no entries for Joe Howard. And after weeks of searching online through thousands of websites, all of our searches came up with nothing. So, who is Joe Howard? And better yet, how come the world has not been allowed to hear this song? Recently, my wife checked into the address found on the record's label. The address is the location of the Brill Building. The Brill Building, built in 1931, is an office building located at 1619 Broadway in the New York City borough of Manhattan, just north of Times Square. The Brill Building, named after the Brill brothers, who owned a clothing store on the street level and who later bought the entire building from its developer, A.E. Lefcourt, was intended as a financial office space for brokers and bankers. In the midst of the Depression, the timing couldn't have been worse, and the owners resorted to renting space to music publishers. For this reason, the Brill Building became a centerpiece for the music industry in New York and the country, with many publishers and writers using the space for their offices and storefronts. By 1962, the Brill Building contained 165 music businesses. A musician could find a publisher, a printer, cut a demo, produce the record, and cut a deal with radio promoters, all within one building. The creative culture of the independent music companies of Brill Building and the nearby 1650 Broadway came to define the influential Brill Building sound and the style of popular music songwriting and recording created by its writers and producers. Famous Brill Building musicians and songwriters include Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, Stoller and Lieber, Phil Spector, Carole King, Hal David, Burt Bacharach, Neil Sedaka, Paul Anka, Ike and Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, Jim Croce, Bobby Darin, John Denver, Neil Diamond, Bob Dylan, Howard Greenfield, Billy Joel, Johnny Mercer, Chris Christopherson, John Lennon, Joni Mitchell, Carly Simon, Paul Simon, and James Taylor, just to name a few. After hearing the song Never by Joe Howard, I'm sure you'll agree that it's a shame that the world does not have access to such a great piece of music. And my hopes are that someone out there has some information about the song or Joe Howard. If you can offer any information, feel free to send me an email. The folks at Jerry's Records and myself would love to know any info that you have to offer. But enough talk already. After all, it's happy hour at Whistling Willie's, and Willie has a new sound for you to hear.
going in the box. Well, found this record in a stack of shit over there. Back when we were over there, we didn't have all this room. Actually, my Damien found it and cleaned it up and listened to it, and it turned out to be pretty good. Joe Howard. Don't know who Joe Howard is. Never heard of him. The song is called Never. The whole thing about it is I want to get the song out there. It's something that fell through the cracks back in the 60s,
That's a hell of a
late
tune,
50s.
man.
And maybe it does exist. And if it exists, then I would love to know who it is.
So
Do
right
we have
now,
more stuff? Because it's good.
Right now, it's a big mystery.
It should have been a record, and it should have sold, you know. You know, you could play this song, and people will like it. You know.
I have searched the whole